Welcome to NCCP, a United Methodist community featuring locations at Grace, Greenmount, and St. John's in Hampstead and Upper Cove, Maryland. You can also find us online at nccpumc.com and on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
All right. So how's those New Year's resolutions working out so far? Working on it? Done? Already? It's January 4th, right? Well, one thing that is common for all of us in here today, whether we have a New Year's resolution or resolutions or not, we will all be going somewhere in 2015. None of us will stay the same. Hopefully all of us go forward, but we could go backward, whatever that means, in all areas of our life. Our faith, our parenting, other family dynamics, our job, our education, our social life, whatever it is, we'll be going on a journey together. With that, we're very excited to start the new year off with this teaching series called Traction. I thought about it that last winter, when I got stuck in the same ditch twice, two different storms, on our street that we live on Laverne Circle. The first time I went and got my neighbor's help. The second time I was way too embarrassed to go get my neighbor, so I just left it in the ditch until the snow melted, a day later or whatever it was. Because the first time he said, like back in December, you need to get new tires. You have no traction. The second time I got stuck was in March. So I hadn't gotten new tires all winter long. And so I started thinking about, man, there's something to having good traction on your tires. I've also been out of control, like going down a hill with the fear of spinning out. Anybody ever spun out in a car? Not on purpose? Yeah, that's pretty scary as well. I've done that a couple times. In fact, yesterday with my new tires, heading towards Thursday. We are heading towards Thursday. It's coming, whether we like it or not. Heading towards 30, coming down by Cape Horn Park, I was not even going too fast. I was just going and started to hit my brakes to prepare to stop and started to get a little bit out of control. But I left my brakes in until the anti-lock took over and I was fine. But it was scary because I had two little ones in the back. And I was scared for myself too. So, but out of control is another issue. And so it's not unusual for you to read spiritual books or to hear a sermon on being stuck. It's not unusual to hear some kind of teaching on being out of control. And that's all good and well and important too, but a lot of times that leaves people out. Because not all of you in here right now are stuck, spiritually or otherwise. Not all of you in here today are out of control. Probably none of you are out of control, right? You got all these people that got their life together. Amen? And that would leave people out. But traction brings us all together because we need traction to get unstuck. We need traction to keep from getting out of control. You need traction just to walk down the street. And so, really the only point of today is traction. So if that's all you remember as you go forward today, somebody asks you at lunch, what did you learn about in church today? You can say, the importance of having traction. And they'll say, oh, wow, that's cool. That's great. And you can go on about your day. All right, let's try again. So anyway, we feel like this is something for all of us. And we're going to look at 4. See that? Prayer works. 4 Old Testament stories to see what we can learn about what traction, that's good to say we all need traction, but how do we get traction in our life? And so we're going to look at 4 stories. And simply that. Today's was Joshua, and we're going to look at and see what we can learn from Joshua about how you and I can have some traction in our life. But before we tackle that story, just want you to take a brief moment to think about in your mind a journey that you are going to take this year, or a mountain you're going to climb, or a pillar you're going to take on, or quite simply a battle that you're going to have with something in your life. And it can be something to do with your faith. It can be, again, one of those other personal items. But just try to get something in your mind that you're going to take where you are today, and by the end of this year, or maybe the end of this month, you're going to be at another place in regards to that issue. Just for an example, maybe you have some debt in your life, and you say, all right, here's where I am with debt. By the end of the year, this is where I'm going to be in terms of a better place in relation to my debt. Or this is where I am with my faith. I just when the going gets tough, I turn back from God. By the end of this year, I want that to look different in my life. So just about 10 seconds, think about one for yourself. We're not going to share them out loud, so think about something tough. All right, let's come back together. Now, if you didn't think of something that quickly, and then your life is really together, because we should. Most of us in here probably have 4 or 5 things, and that's okay too. And you can bring all that together in one going forward, or you can. I prefer, and it's probably from the way I used to coach athletic teams. When you are struggling, you ever coach a bad team? Greenwoods? Yeah. Especially when you're coaching a bad team, you can't tackle everything at once. And so you work on one problem at a time. We're going to address our unforced turnovers. We're going to work on that for a week straight or whatever. Get that under control and you move on to the next thing. That might be a good strategy for you and I. For our personal or our lives of faith as well, is maybe you're really a mess. Maybe I'm really a mess. Maybe I have so many things that seem not to be working in my favor. And so instead of putting it all out on the table, you just go with one. And so that's a good thing as well, a good way to look at it. All right, so with your issue in mind, or issues, let me just pause for a second. It might not be an issue at all, like in terms of negative either. You could take the opposite approach and you say, here's an area in my life where I'm doing really well. I'm winning in this area. It's another coaching strategy. And so instead of concentrating on all the negatives, all the things we're doing wrong, I'm going to perfect this. And so in 2015, I'm going to take this where I'm already winning, and I'm going to knock it out of the park. And I'm going to perfect it. And so that could be another really good strategy for you if you wanted to look at your life in that way. But either way you look at it, you need traction. So let's look at Joshua real quickly and see what we can learn from Joshua about traction. What I love about Joshua is that he spent a long time as the assistant. He was the assistant coach. All right, so he was in the background, right-hand man, and did a lot of good things with Moses, but he wasn't the leader. The buck did not stop with him. And so the whole time in the wilderness, Moses is leading everybody. They're anxious. They've been waiting for how many years to go over to the promised land? 40. Okay, and so it's a long time. 40 years. The people have been wandering around. Some good days and some bad days. Some days where they make some movement. Some days where it seems like they're just going around in a circle. Some days when they're hungry. Some days when they're filled. Some days when they're honoring God. Some days when they're complaining and whining and turning their back. And Joshua has experienced all this. So now it is, Moses has died. And they're at the cusp of crossing over the river into the promised land. Moses has died. He's not going to get to see it, or he's not going to get to cross into it. He saw it. He's not going to cross over into it. Joshua has been handpicked and commissioned to take the people over. And so now Joshua, who has been the assistant, is now the head man. And now he has this group of people that he's ready to lead, and they're ready to be led. They are over anxious, and they are probably thinking to themselves, man, finally Moses died, and now we can move on. And so you can just imagine all the yapping in Joshua's ear. What I love about this story is right in the beginning is when they're told, okay, now it's going to happen. Let's get ready to do this. Joshua still has to get the people to wait 3 more days. And you and I say, well, what's 3 days when you've been waiting 40 years? But what we have to think about is this is a mob mentality. It's a mob mentality. And they are so anxious to walk in. They haven't been just waiting 40 years. They've been waiting for generations to walk into the land that was promised to them by God. And so, we're talking anxious, very anxious people. And Joshua has to convince them that no, it's not today. It's not tomorrow. It's the next day. Why did he get them to wait? Why were they to wait? Why did, when they got the green light, God gives them the green light and shows them the way, why is it important that Joshua, the leader, gets the people to wait 3 more days? What's going to happen in those 3 days? Does anybody? And it doesn't have to be specifics, but what are they doing in those 3 days? Any guesses? Let's just guess. Let's play a guessing game. All right, doing some reflection. One of the things they're going to reflect on is the law. And God's going to say right to them, he says, every day, remember the law that I gave Moses. And so absolutely some reflection. Because as you're moving forward, it's always important and critical that you remember where you've come from. Anything else?
I have to be clean, ritual cleansings and turnover authority, Joshua.
All right, so Sharon says they have some ceremonial things to do. And that's absolutely right. So they have, again, that goes tied back to law, but they have some cleaning to do, and not just cleaning house, which is probably... We were in Nashville for a few days this week, and we were in a house that we had to clean before we could come home, which really meant was the kids and I watched TV while Melissa cleaned up the whole house, 2-story house. And then every time we'd say, aren't we ready to go yet? You wanted to see a reaction. So anyway, especially when I was trying to get to the next place to be able to see the Sugar Bowl. I was mapping out the hours on the road before we had to get a hotel so we could watch the whole game, and that really made her happy. That I was rushing her for football for 2 teams that we didn't care about. So anyway, yeah, some cleaning. All right, and some preparation in terms of that. What else? Anybody else know what else happens? All right, read the first 3 or 4 chapters of Joshua for homework. It's really fascinating. But some other things they're going to do is they're going to get some supplies ready, right? So on the front end of a trip, TC, you're going camping. All right, a venturing crew going on a ski trip. All right, you better have a supply list, right? Not just throwing a bunch of things in the trunk. You're going to be very disappointed when you get there and you need something. All right, so yeah, they're going to get some supplies ready. That happens in verse 10. He's giving orders out who's going to get what, where, when. All right, now, so cleaning, some reflection, some supplies, some just overall planning. And then we have a big one here in chapter 2. Here's what happens in chapter 2. Joshua secretly sent 2 men as spies over into the land. He says, look over the land, especially Jericho. They set out and entered the house of the prostitute named Rahab. All right, it's a fascinating story, and that's where we first learned of Rahab there. So they send out some spies. All right, so they don't just run into the new land, because partly this is a military campaign. And so they send out some spies to get lay of the land. All right? All of this that we've just described the reflection, the cleansing, the orders of supplies and other things, and now the sending out of spies and the bringing back of the report, all happening over a couple days here. All of this is important for the Israelites to have traction on their journey. They want to have good traction at the beginning of their journey, because their journey is not going to be over when they cross the Jordan. Their journey is really just beginning. And in fact, many theologians, people that talk about God for a living and write about God for a living, that specialize in the Israelites, they say this is actually when the people become the Israelites. All right, so we just use a blanket term, but they become a people called the Israelites after they've crossed over into the land. And so that's how important this story is. All right, now that's, doesn't really matter for our purposes, but it's a beginning is what I'm trying to say. So for the beginning of this journey, they need traction, and here's the way they're going to do it. They're going to reflect, they're going to do some ritual activities, they're going to get all their supplies together, and they're going to send out spies. All of this can be captured in the word, I'm going to give it a word, awareness. To have traction, to be prepared to go over into this new land, they needed to be aware. They needed to be aware of themselves and where they've come. They need to be aware of God and what God expected of them. That's the cleansing and the rituals. They needed to be aware of what they needed to take with them, and the supplies. And they needed to be aware of what was out in front of them. And that's where the spies come in. All right, if any of those areas for this story of Joshua come up short, they cut any corners, and they say, oh, forget all that. We've been waiting for 40 years, and we know what's over there. We know where we've come from. We know what we need. Let's just go. Come on, Joshua, take us, or we'll get another leader. I mean, they would have walked in at minimum unprepared, and at maximum they could have been ambushed, and the story could have been over, because not only would they have been stuck and out of control, but they could have been eliminated before they even got started. And so it's very, very important. And so now let's bring us back to our issues today. And so whatever it is that you've named for yourself as a place you want to go here in this new year, whether it's your resolution or whether it's something you just thought of this morning, and you apply this same theological outlook to it. A, that you need traction. Because if you tackle this, if you go forward in whatever it is that you're trying to address, let's just say it's debt, the one I originally used, and you do not have any traction right off the bat, you could get either out of control or you could get stuck without being aware of where you've come from, aware about what God expects of you in this area of debt, aware of what you need to tackle it, and aware of what lies ahead, good and bad and indifferent. All right, and so apply those things to your issue. So doing a little bit of work on the front end, it might slow you down a little bit, and that's probably the point. We get real excited. How many of you don't have to raise your hand, have ever gotten really excited about a new adventure in your life? You heard about a new diet. You want to be on the one that I'm on, right? Because you see how good a shape I'm in. Or you've heard about a new company that's opening, and you might want to, quit your job and go work for them. Whatever it is, I'm struggling with examples. But you get real excited about something, and you go full force into it, and before you know it, it's a disaster. I mean, we've all been there. So this is not an opportunity to point fingers. We've all done that. And depending on our personalities, you've probably done that more than once in your life. And so that's just another point to this whole thing. Slow down. There's nothing wrong with slow. And you're going to have people yapping in your ears. Like, oh man, I did this. Here's what you do. Just go do it. Go for it. put your head down, pull your boots up, go work hard at it, you're going to be fine. That's all you need. Or they're going to say, hey, just have faith in God and just take a step and go. Well, that's good and true and fine. But there's also nothing wrong with slowing down, being aware. Because being aware is going to give you traction. And having traction is going to prevent you from getting stuck and prevent you from being out of control and getting out of control. It might feel like it's slow and steady, but that's the point. And that's what's going to set us up for success in whatever it is and wherever it is we're trying to improve ourselves and tackle in 2015. It could be, we've named some things so far. Also, don't forget, it could be a sin. Maybe there's a sin that we're holding on to that we can't let go of, or we can't improve, or we can't, it's just got a hold of our life. I mean, that's where sin is really dangerous. Sin, we all sin, yes, and we all make mistakes, absolutely. And we get forgiveness and we're covered by the blood of Christ. But it's those sins that are perpetual and that we can't let go of and that have control of our life and dominate our life. Those are all sin is bad and all sin is equal, but those are the ones that we need to address today. And what you need to apply the same theological concept of traction to as well. You got to be aware of where you've come from and where you're going and what God says about it and what supplies you need to tackle this sin, what support you need, and what lies ahead. What's the enemy thinking tomorrow about this sin that you have today? And so don't underestimate the power of traction to deal with sin as well. And so it's another powerful tool, an important thing to think about as we go forward. So now, just in 10 seconds or so, think about what you thought about earlier and see if you can ingrain in your brain or in your soul this idea that you need traction, and traction needs awareness. You need to be aware of where you're starting and where you're going before you even take your first step. All right, and just to close, Joshua is a great book to read. I would read the rest of it for homework. He's a great leader. He's a great military leader and a great leader for God. He's going to make plenty of mistakes. All four of these stories that we're going to talk about, we didn't say much about Joshua today. We'll say more about, because we had the introduction of traction today. But we're going to be talking about like Deborah, for example. And we're going to tell a lot of details about Deborah. And she's a great Old Testament character. But all these characters are ordinary humans like you and I, who have been called and equipped by God, but at the same time make mistakes and are sinful and have to deal with the consequences of sin as well. And so they're fascinating characters. And so I hope you invite us back next week. If you miss any of these in the series this January, don't forget, you can watch online or with our app. If you follow us on Facebook, you'll catch when they're posted to be able to catch up. You can pass them on to friends or family as well. So, amen.